Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about smooth muscle contraction. So we've got a couple of outcomes for this. All right, so when we're talking about smooth muscle fiber, there's a couple things to keep in mind. They're football shaped, okay, so they kind of bulge out at the center. They do contain actin and myosin, and the actin is attached basically by something called dense bodies that are going to be really important here in a minute. So, and then the other thing is that there are no T-tubules on smooth muscle fibers, and part of that, or the main reason for that, is just the way that they contract is very different from skeletal muscle. So when it comes to smooth muscle contraction, there's no troponin or tropomyosin. However, there's a protein called calmodulin. Okay, and what happens is an action potential comes down into the smooth muscle cell, and it causes increased calcium in the sarcoplasm, just like it does with skeletal muscle cell. However, the difference is most of this calcium comes from the extracellular fluid. Ultimately, this calcium binds to calmodulin, and this activates an enzyme on myosin called myosin light chain kinase. Okay, and what this does is this causes ATP that's on the myosin head to break down, and ultimately this actually allows actin and myosin to bind together. So that's kind of similar to skeletal muscle, right? Okay, and so what happens is as we go through this process is that actin, as it's pulled, slides by myosin and pulls on the dense bodies. So as we move actin, the dense bodies are pulled. This causes the dense bodies to pull on something called intermediate filaments, which we can see here. All right, and what ends up happening is that there's this corkscrew motion that causes the ends to pull together towards the center, and we get a bulge in the midsection. Okay, and so it looks even more like a football. So you can see here we've got kind of this spindle shape, or this like stretched out football. Now we're looking more like a football. Okay. Now this contraction continues until there's no more calcium, or that there's a lot less calcium. And so calcium is pumped out of the sarcoplasm by a calcium pump, and most of it goes out into the extracellular fluid. Some of it goes back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum. But just like in a skeletal muscle cell, there's always a small amount of calcium inside the sarcoplasm of a smooth muscle cell. And so this is really important because it allows the smooth muscle to remain contracted to some extent. So we always have some sort of smooth muscle tone. And this is really important with smooth muscle. When you think about smooth muscle, just, for example, think about blood vessels. Okay, we need some tone, we need some tension so that the blood will flow through. Otherwise, it would cause this tissue to expand and blood wouldn't really go anywhere. All right. And one of the great things about smooth muscle contraction, they don't generate a lot of force, and this is great because that means they don't require a lot of energy, and so these contractions can go on for a very long time, but at a very low cost. And so, at the end of the first day of week 6, can you do the following 2 things? Can you explain the process of smooth muscle contraction? And can you identify or explain the differences between skeletal and smooth muscle contraction?